the sound of steam, freight trains, and the New York Central system. The New York Central system? Yes. It's just a memory now in many people's minds. A few years back, the New York Central merged with the Pennsylvania Railroad and became the Penn Central. Now that too is gone, and it's Conrail. But this sign still exists. It hangs in Dad's garage. And the New York Central system is where it all began for Dad a little more than 36 years ago when Dad was 28. Recently in his last trip, he told how he happened to get a job on the railroad.
I was working on WPA.
What's that?
Works in Progress Administration. On the Recreation Department, I was making $81 a month.
Did Grandpa have anything to do with you getting a job on the New York Central?
Yes, he spoke to his brother, my Uncle Paul, and my Uncle Paul spoke to the superintendent. The superintendent told me to come down and hire out, so I went down and hired out as a brakeman.
36 years later, it was down to this: the last time he would be called to work over the telephone. Before breakfast, that first cup of coffee. Take note of Dad's early morning natural afro. He should wear it like that. People would never know he's a little thin on top. Gladys packs the sandwiches. 9 of them. That's why Paul and I went along on Dad's last run. We thought 9 sandwiches were a bit too much for Dad. Dad gets his coffee ready and keeps an eye on the scrambled eggs. Breakfast, the last meal before the last run. It's ham and eggs. The eggs are on the plate. The ham is holding the fork.
I'll be waiting for the evening train. You'll be the reason I'll be waiting for the train. I'll be swinging down a country lane, timing my time to the evening train. Roll on over the hill, roll on passing the mill.
December 12, 1976. It's 9 a.m. and we prepare to leave for the Collinwood yard.
Engine number 9, coming down the railroad line. How much?
No, it isn't engine number 9. It's number 3262, one of the 4 engines that will head up Dad's last trip. It's about 10:30 a.m. now as Dad steps onto the caboose. Dad's the conductor. That means he's the man in charge of the train. And contrary to what some people think, railroad men do work after they get on the train. Here Dad makes notations about the number of cars on TV 14, the identification of this particular freight train, TV standing for trailer vans, the type of freight being hauled. The men on the caboose are required to watch very closely any passing train and then signal the other caboose to let them know whether everything is okay or not okay. Paul watches Dad to make sure he's waving properly. Another caboose passes and the conductor waves back. Dad looked serious here, but he had time for some reflection and remembered one of the more humorous events that happened during his 36 years.
One time we were working on a local. Ray McCullough, Woody Thomas, myself. I can't remember who the other brakeman was, but Woody Thomas always did the cooking. He was the cook. We ate on the caboose, all the time. And, he was making breaded veal. And Ray McCullough, he was quite an eater, so he thought he would play a little trick on McCullough, so he took some paper napkins and wadded them all up and dipped them in the egg batter, covered them all over with breadcrumbs, fried it up nice golden brown and put it on McCullough's plate. What happened? Well, I couldn't, I wouldn't want to put it on the recorder what McCullough said to Woody Thomas.
There are many memories in 36 years of riding trains, mainly between Cleveland and Buffalo. Here's a picture of a tower building in Ashtabula, the city where I grew up, and the city that Dad worked out of for a few years. The same tower further down the tracks. About a quarter of a mile further, the old Ashtabula Depot. The old days, probably 15 to 20 passenger trains a day stopped here. I remember my grandfather coming through in the late 40s and early 50s. He worked in the baggage car. Dad would bring us down to the station, and we'd say hello to Gramps for the 5 minutes or so that he was here. Another quarter of a mile, and you can see part of Depot Street. Somewhere in those buildings to the left, Dad used to bring me to get a haircut. Now about 35 miles down the road, Erie International Airport. Airplanes and superhighways help to all but kill the multitude of passenger trains. Ever look out the window of a caboose? This is what you see. Somewhere in front of those 50-plus cars is the engine and the engineer. If you look out to the side, you also see this. For years and years, Dad saw the old nickel plate on those tracks. Now it's the Norfolk and Western. A crossing where railroad and highway meet. Many tragedies have occurred at places like this one. Dad remembered one such incident that had a happy ending.
During World War II, I was on a sailor special passenger train hauling a bunch of sailors going down on the branch on single track. And all of a sudden, the train went in emergency. We stopped, backed up. And here we hit a guy on a tractor. He was still sitting on the seat on the tractor, had a hold of the steering wheel, and the rest of the tractor was all gone. He was just sitting there petrified. He was still there. No, it wasn't even hurt. Didn't move. No, it wasn't. Didn't even move. He was just scared to death.
The brakeman on Dad's last run was Ray Thomas, a brother to Woody Thomas, the fellow that Dad already mentioned. And Ray had some recollections.
Ray, how long have you known Dad?
Well, I believe our friendship goes back maybe to about 1935 or 36. I kind of hate to say that, kind of dates a person, but I believe that at the time we first knew each other, Bud worked for WPA, and he was an artist, and I believe he made $81 a month, and I was a timekeeper on WPA at $50 a month. I don't need to emphasize too strongly we didn't have too much money to throw away then, but on the other hand, we had an awful nice time.
Ray was used to railroad work. He wasn't used to interviews with would-be reporters, and he was so tuckered out after he talked with me that he just had to take a nap. For those watching who have never seen the inside of a caboose, here is a good look. Paul and Dad are sitting in about the middle of the caboose. The oil stove heater is behind Paul. Behind Dad is the restroom. Further back on the right is an ice cooler, lockers on the left, and then the rear seat where Dad was earlier working on papers. To my immediate right is an empty bunk. To my immediate left is a bunk where Ray Thomas was fast asleep. Paul sits in the front seat looking out the front window. What is he looking at? Beautiful sight, isn't it? Paul brought his camera along also and decided that taking pictures out the back door was quite a bit better and more fruitful than taking pictures out the front door. Back inside, a picture of Dad and me. We finally woke Ray up and had him take this infamous picture of the Pickard family. Paul is sitting there thinking, We're not going to make it back in time for me to go to school tomorrow. Oh, no. Eddie Jr. is thinking, I've got to teach school tomorrow, and we're not going to make it back in time. Oh, boy. Dad is contemplating, Lord, why did I bring these two clowns along? Several times as we neared Buffalo, we stopped for about 5 to 10 minutes each time. During one of these stops, 3 railroad buffs were walking along the tracks taking pictures, and they asked if they could look inside the caboose, so Dad invited them in. Most of our trip was during the day, but a railroad man who has spent 36 years on the main line between Cleveland and Buffalo has seen many night scenes like this one. A couple of times on this last run, I caught Dad in deep thought. Was he reliving the 36 years? Was he thinking of retirement? Again, he seemed so serious. But he did have some happy thoughts about retirement.
Well, hoping I'll have lots of time to do all the things I'd like to do. I don't suppose I will have, but at least I'll get some of them done. Got a lot of things I'd like to do. I'd like to start painting again and work on a railroad, play the fiddle, do some barber shopping.
Ever since he was a kid, Dad has been a talented artist. He's painted pictures of people and trains and even dogs. And here he works on a painting of Sheba, the family dog, up until last year, until she had to be put to sleep. Did he say work on the railroad? This is the one he means, at least the engine part of it, that Dad's brother-in-law Lee and brother Richard are admiring. Dad spent 8 years building that from scratch. He spent many early mornings at his workbench in the garage. The time spent has paid off, with the engine and a track that surrounds the house. If Dad's lucky, he may even get his grandson Mark back on for a ride. But by the looks of this picture, that may be a difficult task. Fiddle, did he say? Fiddle indeed. Ever see a guy laugh while he fiddles? Barber shopping, sometimes with his son Eddie and his daughter Kay, and his former barbershop chorus director, Alfield Johnson. But most of the time, it is with his barbershop buddies who are part of the Johnny Cake Bridge chapter.
Where the days they danced that old black bottom straw hat, oh yeah, that got 'em. Rah, rah, rumble seats and running boards, them was the good old days. They had the Foxtrot, Charleston, and old black bottom. That old straw hat, oh yeah, that got 'em. Bring back the good old-fashioned, those good old days.
The daydreaming is over and we're back on the caboose. Dad has his hat and coat on, and we are almost to Buffalo. Eyes closed again. He works well that way. Dad talks to the engineer. Quite a change over the old flag and lantern system.
Yeah, hello.
Drop that head man off there. I don't think his radio's working. I can't hear it.
The train stops, we gather our stuff and get off. After all the picture taking on this last run, we now have 2 hams. They shake hands and say goodbye. I see this picture and I recall Ray's words.
And it's kind of an ironic thing. In the 8 years I've been in this position of brakeman, this is the first time that I've worked with Bud, and as a brakeman, I thought the thing would never come. He's a very nice fellow to work for, and as I said, the friendship goes back a long ways, and it's one of those things the two men have between themselves that a lot of love, brotherly love, respect that you just can't make.
The railroad years are over. The Bible says in Ecclesiastes that to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Dad has had his season of labor, and now comes the season of retirement. And so his 36 years of railroad life come to the end.